I used to believe hospitals were the only places where people told the truth. That sounds sweet. I know. Almost adorable. Like something you would stitch on a pillow and sell at a gift shop next to the overpriced hand lotion. But when you spend enough years in an ICU, you learn that truth usually shows up when everybody is too tired to keep lying. The smell of antiseptic does not care about your family name. A heart monitor does not flatter you. A ventilator does not ask whether your sister has a prettier Instagram feed. Under fluorescent lights, people become exactly who they are. That was my world. My name is Audra Bennett. I was 29 years old, a specialized ICU nurse. And by the time this story began, I had already spent too many nights keeping strangers alive while my own family treated me like a walking debit card with good posture. I worked at St. Bartholomew Medical Center in Maryland. Mostly nights. Mostly critical care. If you have never worked a 14-hour hospital shift, let me explain it in plain English. Your feet stop belonging to you around hour 9. Your back files a formal complaint around hour 11. By hour 13, coffee stops tasting like coffee and starts tasting like a legal requirement. Still, I loved my job. Not every minute of it. Nobody loves chasing down a missing lab result at 2 in the morning while a resident is pretending not to panic. But I loved the purpose. I loved knowing that when a room turned chaotic, I could become calm. I could read a monitor, hear the change in a patient's breathing, catch the tiny warning signs before the machines started screaming. My coworkers called it my Nurse Audra face. Flat voice. Steady hands. No drama. That face had saved lives. Unfortunately, that same calm had also made me the perfect daughter to exploit. My father, Marshall Bennett, was the kind of man who used phrases like return on investment at Thanksgiving dinner. He was a retired finance executive, which in our family meant he had spent 30 years turning every human emotion into a spreadsheet and still somehow believed he was the warm one. My mother, Beverly, believed conflict could be solved with a tight smile, a pearl necklace, and denial pressed so hard it could laminate itself. Then there was my younger sister, Kinsley. Kinsley was 26, blonde in a way that required appointments, and had been called our little star so many times that I was surprised NASA had not sent her paperwork. She was not evil in the cartoon sense. She did not sit in a chair petting a cat. She was worse. She was helpless on purpose, and my parents rewarded it. When Kinsley needed rent, I helped. When Kinsley crashed her leased car into a mailbox because she was emotionally overwhelmed, I helped. When my parents said they were short on property taxes because Dad's investment timing was complicated, I helped. That was the family system. Kinsley sparkled. My parents applauded. I paid the invoice. For years, I told myself it was love. That is one of the oldest tricks in the family handbook. Call it love. And suddenly, you can excuse almost anything. Disrespect becomes need. Manipulation becomes stress. Being used becomes being dependable. But even dependable people have a limit. Mine arrived at 11:37 on a Thursday night, right between a central line dressing change and a patient's daughter asking me if her father could hear her while he was sedated. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my scrub top. I glanced down because I was expecting a lab update. Instead, I saw Kinsley's name. Audra. Emergency. I need $5,000 tonight. I stared at the message, waiting for the second line. Something medical. Something legal. Something involving actual danger. The second message came. My engagement shoot dress situation is ruined. The stylist found a better option, but I have to pay now. I stood there in the hall under those bright hospital lights, holding a flush syringe in one hand and my phone in the other. And I actually laughed, not loudly, just one tired little breath through my nose. A fashion emergency. In the ICU, emergencies have a sound. They are alarms and running shoes on polished floors. They are a respiratory therapist pushing past a curtain. They are a doctor saying, "Call the family." In that careful voice everybody recognizes. Address was not an emergency. I typed back, "No, that was it." One word. No apology. No explanation. No soft cushion wrapped around the boundary so nobody's feelings got bruised. Just no. For a moment, I felt almost dizzy. Not from hunger, Though I had eaten half a granola bar for dinner like a woman making excellent life choices, I felt dizzy because I had done something unfamiliar. I had disappointed my family on purpose. The reply came fast. Are you serious right now? Then another. You make nurse money and act poor. Then my mother joined in. Because of course she did. Kinsley had probably handed Beverly the phone like a wounded soldier passing a flag. Audra. Your sister is under tremendous stress. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I looked through the glass wall into my patient's room. A man named Mr. Wallace was lying there with a tube down his throat while his wife slept in a chair beside him, still wearing her winter coat. That woman had not complained once. She had held his hand for 6 hours and thanked me every time I adjusted his blanket. That was stress. I typed, I'm working. I'm not sending money for a dress. My mother answered with the sentence that had followed me my entire adult life. You always make things harder than they need to be. There it was. The family motto. Basically, I turned my phone face down and went back to work. By the time my shift ended, my body felt like it had been assembled from spare parts. My hair was half falling out of its clip. My socks were damp from a spill I did not want to identify. My lunch bag had one untouched apple in it. Because apparently I had packed optimism that morning. Outside, the hospital parking lot was wrapped in fog. Not a cute little mist. Real Maryland highway fog. Thick enough to make streetlights look blurred and tired. The kind that turns familiar roads into suggestions. I should have stayed in the break room for 20 minutes. I knew that. Nurses are very good at giving practical advice and very bad at following it when we are exhausted. So I got in my 10-year-old Honda, turned on the defroster, and told myself I was only 12 miles from home. My phone was at 3%. Then 2. Then 1. I had forgotten my charger upstairs. Of course I had. I tossed the phone into the passenger seat and pulled out of the lot. The roads were almost empty. The whole world had that strange after-midnight stillness. When gas stations glow like little islands and every traffic light seems too bright. For the first few miles, I drove slowly, both hands on the wheel, wipers dragging moisture across the windshield. My mind kept circling back to that one word, no. It should not have felt revolutionary. Grown women say no every day. They say no to extra shifts, bad dates, pushy, salesmen, and people trying to sell extended warranties on refrigerators. But in my family, no was treated like vandalism. I could already imagine my father's response. Audra, you need to think about the family. What he meant was, think about everyone except yourself. My chest tightened, but not with guilt this time. Something else sat there. Something cleaner. Maybe anger. Maybe relief. Maybe the first tiny sign of a backbone that had been there all along, waiting for me to stop apologizing for it. I was 3 intersections from the highway when the fog thickened. The light ahead turned green. I eased forward. That was when I saw the black SUV. It came from my left. Fast. Too fast. No hesitation. No brake lights. Just a dark shape cutting through the fog like the driver had decided traffic laws were for people with smaller egos. There are moments in life when the brain becomes strangely professional. Mine did. I did not scream. I did not pray. I did not think of childhood memories or unfinished dreams. Nurse Audra showed up. Even then, I registered speed, angle, impact point. Driver's side. Bad. Then the SUV ran the red light. The crash was not loud at first. That is the part people never understand. In my memory, the first second was almost silent. My body moved before sound caught up. The world tilted. Glass burst across the dark like ice. The steering wheel slammed hard against me, and the seatbelt locked so tight it stole the air from my lungs. Then came the noise. Metal folding. Tires screaming. A horn stuck somewhere, blaring into the fog. My Honda spun. Once, maybe twice. The hospital training in my head started naming things I could not control. Posible rib fractures. Chest trauma. Head injury. Internal bleeding. I tasted copper. The car stopped at an angle near the curb. Or maybe the median. It was hard to tell. The windshield had become a spiderweb. The dashboard lights blinked like they were confused. I tried to breathe. Pain answered. Sharp. Heavy. Wrong. My right hand twitched toward the passenger seat. I needed my phone. I needed to call 911. I needed to tell them my name, my location, my allergies, my blood type. If I could stay awake long enough. My fingers brushed the screen. Black, dead. For one ridiculous second. I felt offended. Not scared. Offended. I had survived a lifetime of Bennett family nonsense. And now my phone had chosen this moment to be dramatic. Then a colder thought moved through me. My emergency contact. I had never changed it. Years earlier, during nursing school, I had filled out forms in a rush. Back then, I still believed my father was the person you called when things fell apart. I had listed Marshall Bennett, not because he was safe, because he was official. There is a difference. And I learned it too late. My vision narrowed. The fog outside glowed red and white from approaching headlights. Someone was shouting. Far away. A car door opened. Footsteps ran across wet pavement. I wanted to tell them not to call my father. I wanted to say there was another form somewhere. An old healthcare proxy from nursing school. A name my family hated. Elias Bennett. My uncle. The black sheep. The only Bennett who had ever told me. You do not owe people your bones just because they gave you your last name. But my mouth would not work. My body had spent years obeying me in emergencies. Now it refused. As the first stranger reached my broken window, I heard him say, "Ma'am, stay with me." I wanted to answer, "I'm trying." Instead, all I could do was stare at the dead phone beside me and think, with a clarity that felt almost cruel, that my life was about to be handed to the very people who had spent years treating it like an expense. Then everything went black. The darkness did not feel like sleep. Sleep is gentle. Sleep gives you dreams. Or at least the mercy of not knowing where you are. What happened to me was different. It was like being locked inside a room with the lights off while people stood outside the door discussing what you were worth. I did not know that at first. At first, there were only pieces. A beep, a hand lifting my eyelid, cold air across my chest. Someone saying, "Pressure is dropping." Another voice, calm and female, saying, "Hang another unit." I wanted to tell them I was an ICU nurse. I wanted to say I knew the language. I understood the clipped words, the fast decisions, the way fear gets pushed behind procedure because panic wastes time. I wanted to help them help me, which was ridiculous, since I was the one lying there like a busted appliance with a hospital bracelet, but my body had resigned from the conversation. Later, I learned they took me to Northbridge Regional, the rival hospital across town, St. Bartholomew, where I worked. It was on diversion that night because the emergency department was packed past capacity. That little twist would matter more than anyone expected. At Northbridge, I was not Nurse Audra. I was unidentified female trauma for the first stretch. Then my wallet gave them my name. My dead phone gave them nothing. My emergency records gave them Marshall Bennett. My father. The official contact, not the safe one. I was in a medically induced coma by then. Chest trauma. Internal bleeding. A brain injury, they were watching closely. And enough bruising to make my chart look like it had been written by someone who hated short summaries. They put me on a ventilator, started the scans, called neurology, called surgery, called the people you call when a body is trying very hard to leave. And then they called my parents. Marshall and Beverly arrived at 9:18 in the morning. I know the time because Uncle Elias later got the visitor log, the security footage, and every note Northbridge tried to pretend was not important. My uncle had many flaws, but missing paperwork was not one of them. The man could smell a hidden document the way a bloodhound smells bacon. My parents walked through the sliding doors, dressed like they were late for brunch. My mother wore cream-colored wool and sunglasses big enough to hide a whole bad conscience. My father wore a navy overcoat, polished shoes, and that tight expression he used whenever life failed to respect his calendar. A social worker met them near the ICU doors. "She is critical," the woman told them. "The next 24 to 72 hours are very important," my mother asked. "Will there be scarring?" That was Beverly. A car could wrap around her daughter, and her mind still found a way to wander toward appearances. I am not saying vanity was her religion, but she certainly attended services. The social worker tried again. "She has significant injuries. The physicians can explain more." My father did not ask whether I was conscious. He did not ask whether I had been in pain. He did not ask who had hit me, whether the police were involved, or whether I had said anything before sedation. He asked, "What kind of facility is this?" The social worker blinked. "Sir? Private? Non-profit? What network?" Because of course Marshall Bennett needed to know the brand of the building before deciding how much compassion to spend. They were taken to a small family consultation room. Not my bedside. Not at first. The doctors wanted to stabilize me before bringing them in. But there was also paperwork. There is always paperwork. Hospitals run on medicine, machines, and forms that multiply when nobody is looking. A billing coordinator came in with a folder. Now, before anyone says that is unrealistic, let me tell you something. As a nurse, money enters the room faster than most families want to admit. Insurance does not wait politely outside while grief has a moment. It walks in with a clipboard and sensible shoes. The coordinator explained that my insurance was active. Good coverage. Actually, ICU nurses know better than to gamble with health insurance. My plan covered most of the emergency treatment. 90%, depending on the length of stay, specialists, facility charges, and rehabilitation needs. 90% sounds wonderful until the remaining 10% is attached to a long-term coma. Multiple procedures, weeks in critical care, and months in rehab. My father leaned back in his chair. My mother asked, "But she has insurance." The coordinator nodded. "She does. But there may still be significant out-of-pocket responsibility." "How significant?" Marshall asked. The coordinator gave a range. "A cautious one. Hospitals love cautious ranges. Wide enough to be honest. Vague enough to avoid a lawsuit." My father's jaw moved slightly. I had seen that look my whole life. It was the same look he had when Kinsley wanted a designer bag and when I needed help with nursing school textbooks. Numbers were arranging themselves behind his eyes. Columns, debits, losses, opportunities. "How long could she remain like this?" he asked. The coordinator said, "That is a medical question. I'm asking financially." There it was. Not how long could my daughter suffer. Not what are her chances. Financially. A doctor came in soon after. Dr. Harlan. Trauma, critical care. I read his notes later. They were clean, professional, and careful. He told my parents I was unstable but not hopeless. He explained that brain swelling needed time. He explained that sedation made it impossible to judge my neurological recovery too early. He explained that the next 72 hours mattered. My mother cried then. I want to be fair. She did cry. But Beverly's tears always had an audience. Even in a hospital consultation room, she seemed aware of the angle of her face. "My poor baby," she said. For half a second, maybe she meant it. Then her phone buzzed. Kinsley. Of course. My mother stepped out to answer. And when she came back, she looked more stressed than when she had been told her older daughter might not wake up. "Kinsley is hysterical," she whispered to my father. "The engagement photographer needs confirmation by noon." The doctor was still in the room. "Dr." Harlan paused. I like to imagine that was the moment he realized the Bennett family had arrived with matching luggage and no emotional equipment. My father rubbed his forehead. "We have commitments," he said. "Doctor." Harlan looked at him. "Your daughter is in critical condition." "Yes. And we are trying to understand the realistic outcome." Realistic outcome. That was Marshall's favorite phrase whenever he wanted to make cruelty sound mature. "What are you asking me, doctor?" Harlan said. My father lowered his voice. "But not enough. I am asking whether continued aggressive intervention is medically reasonable." That sentence would have impressed a boardroom. In an ICU. It landed like a cold instrument on bare skin. The doctor explained again. "Too early. Too soon. Watch and wait. Supportive care. Reassess neurological function." Marshall heard only cost. Beverly heard inconvenience. And Kinsley, from wherever she was, heard that her emergency dress money might be delayed by her sister's inconsiderate coma. A nurse named Pat was assigned to me that day. Patricia Morales. 62 years old. 5'3", gray braid, sharp eyes, and the kind of nurse who could silence a room by lowering her voice. Every hospital has one. The young doctors fear her. The smart ones listen. Pat later told Elias that my parents came to my bedside for exactly 11 minutes before asking where they could get proper coffee. My mother stood near the foot of the bed. Not close enough to touch me. My father looked at the machines. Ventilator, IV pumps, monitor, drains. To him, it probably looked expensive before it looked human. He asked Pat. Can she hear us? Pat said. Sometimes patients can process more than we know. That made him uncomfortable. Good. I wish I could tell you I heard everything clearly. I did not. Coma is not like television. You do not float above your body collecting perfect dialogue for later revenge. That would be convenient. And frankly, I would have appreciated the organization. What I had were fragments. My mother's perfume, my father's voice saying, "We need to be practical." The word, burden. The phrase, quality of life. And once, very close to my ear, Pat saying, "Hang in there, honey. I've seen tougher cases turn around." I held on to that voice without knowing I was holding on. By late afternoon, Marshall requested a private meeting. He did not request a chaplain. He did not request a second neurological opinion. He did not call my coworkers, though my badge and hospital ID were in my belongings. He requested paperwork, advance directives, decision-making authority, do not resuscitate status, withdrawal options, big words, sharp edges, a different doctor, one from the ethics team, joined the conversation. So did the hospital social worker. They asked whether I had an advance directive. Marshall said he was my father and emergency contact. My mother said, Audra always trusted him with serious matters. That was almost funny. I trusted my father with serious matters the way you trust a raccoon near an open trash can. You understand the risk. But sometimes you are too tired to lock everything down. They asked what I would want. My father answered quickly. She would not want to live hooked to machines. That part was partly true. Nobody wants that forever. But forever had not arrived. It had barely been one day. The ethics doctor said, "We are not at the point of determining permanence." Marshall folded his hands. "My daughter has been a financial drain her whole life," he said. "There are sentences that split a life in two, before and after. That was one of them. I did not hear it clearly in the moment. I learned it later from Pat, who heard it from just outside the door, and documented, family expressed financial distress and concern regarding prolonged care. Nurses are masters of writing polite notes about ugly behavior," Marshall continued. "She has no spouse, no children, no real assets worth destroying the rest of the family over. My younger daughter has a future, a wedding, a life beginning. Audra would understand that resources are not unlimited. Resources, not love, not hope. Resources." My mother did not stop him. "That is important. People love to focus on the loud villain because he makes the cleaner target. But silence signs its name too." Beverly sat beside him with a tissue pressed under one eye and let my father turn my life into a budget cut. The doctor warned them that a DNR did not mean stopping all care. It meant that if my heart stopped, they would not perform CPR. He explained the difference between DNR and withdrawal of life support. He explained risks. He explained uncertainty. Marshall listened with the solemn face of a man pretending he had been forced into wisdom. Then he said, "Let her go." 3 words. So simple, so tidy, so easy to say when you are standing upright and breathing on your own. My mother whispered. Marshall, for 1 second. I wonder if she almost found a spine. Then he looked at her and said, "Beverly, we cannot ruin everyone's life over this." Everyone. Apparently, I had already been removed from the count. The hospital staff hesitated. They had concerns. Pat had more than concerns. Pat had the expression of a woman mentally sharpening a shovel, but Marshall was listed as my emergency contact. No newer document had surfaced yet. I was unmarried. No children. No awake patient to object. The forms came out. The DNR form looked harmless. I suppose. Paper always does. White sheet. Black print. Boxes. Signature line. A place where death can wear office clothes. Marshall took the pen, and this is the part that stayed with me later. Even more than the words. His signature was steady, not shaky with grief, not broken by doubt. Steady. Marshall Bennett signed his name like he was approving a landscaping estimate. Beverly looked away. The doctor gathered the forms. The room stayed quiet. Then my father clicked the pen shut on the DNR form. Elias Bennett's car door slammed in the hospital parking lot. That was how close I came to becoming a line item in my father's private budget. Not a daughter. Not a nurse. Not a person who had spent years giving chest compressions until her shoulders burned. Calling families with a steady voice. And holding strangers' hands through the worst nights of their lives. A line item. Fortunately for me. Hospitals are full of people who notice what others hope they will ignore. Pat Morales noticed. She had been a nurse for almost 4 decades, which meant she could spot 3 things faster than most people could blink: a crashing patient, a lying relative, and a piece of paperwork that did not smell right. Marshall had signed the DNR. Beverly had looked away. The doctors had documented their concerns in careful professional language. Everyone was moving through the machine of procedure, because that is what hospitals do. They try to keep order even when people bring chaos through the front doors wearing expensive coats. But Pat did not like it. She did not like how fast my father had moved. She did not like how my mother asked about my apartment before asking whether I had responded to pain. She did not like the way Marshall kept saying burden, as if he had learned it from a brochure titled, How to Sound Responsible While Being Terrible. Most of all, she did not like that I was a nurse. That mattered to her. She would have paperwork somewhere. Pat said later. Nurses always have paperwork. We see too much not to. So while the DNR sat in my chart like a quiet threat, Pat went looking. Not dramatically. No movie music. No running down hallways. Real life is usually less glamorous and more annoying. She searched the electronic record. She checked scanned documents. She called medical records. She asked one of the night clerks to dig through a system that looked like it had been designed during the Civil War and updated by a raccoon. At first, nothing. Marshall Bennett remained listed as my emergency contact. Father, phone number, address, the kind of neat little entry that makes institutions comfortable. But Pat kept going. Around 1:40 in the morning, she found a mismatch, a tiny flag in the system. It was not in the emergency contact field. It was buried under an older upload from when I had been in nursing school. Back when I had completed clinical paperwork before a rotation. A notarized healthcare proxy. Scanned badly. Crooked. Faint. And almost forgotten. But legal. My father was not my medical decision-maker. My proxy was Elias Bennett, Marshall's younger brother, the black sheep, the family exile, the man my father had not spoken to in 10 years because Elias had committed the unforgivable crime of telling the truth at Grandma Margaret's Thanksgiving table. I was 22 when I signed that document. It had been Elias's idea. He was already a lawyer then. Already sharp. Already allergic to family theater. We had coffee one afternoon near my nursing school campus. I remember he wore a dark coat and looked like he had slept in his office. Which he probably had. He asked me who would make medical decisions for me if something happened. I said, my parents, I guess. He stared at me over his coffee. Guessing is how people lose control of their own lives, he said. I rolled my eyes because I was 22 and still believed paperwork was something adults worried about after they bought matching towels. Elias slid a folder across the table. Your father makes decisions based on pride. Your mother makes decisions based on fear. Neither one should be holding a pen near your hospital bed. I told him that sounded dramatic, he said. Good. Remember it. So I signed. Then life got busy. Nursing school, clinicals, night shifts, bills, family problems, Kinsley's endless emergencies. I forgot the document existed. Pat did not. By 1:52 in the morning, Elias had been called. By 1:59, he was in his car. At 2:17, he walked through Northbridge Regional's front entrance wearing a charcoal overcoat, a wrinkled dress shirt, and the expression of a man who had arrived, already disappointed in everyone. He smelled faintly of expensive tobacco and old law books. Which sounds strange unless you knew Elias. Then it made perfect sense. He looked like the kind of attorney who could make a banker sweat by opening a briefcase. Pat met him outside the ICU. You are Elias Bennett? Unfortunately for several people, yes, that was my uncle, even in a medical crisis. He brought sarcasm like a side dish. Pat handed him the copy of the proxy. He read it once. Then again. His face did not change much, but Pat said his eyes did. "What have they signed?" he asked. Pat did not answer in the hallway. Smart woman. She led him to a small consultation room. Dr. Harlan came in. Along with the charge nurse and the administrator on call, Elias placed the healthcare proxy on the table with 2 fingers, as if the paper itself had more dignity than my parents. "I am Audra Bennett's legal healthcare proxy," he said. "Effective immediately. I want the DNR revoked." The administrator cleared his throat. "Mr. Faden. Bennett. Your brother is listed as emergency contact. An emergency contact is not a medical decision maker when a valid proxy exists. We will need legal to review." "You should," Elias said. "And while they review it, no withdrawal of life support. No honoring that DNR. No change in code status without my authorization. If anyone touches her care plan based on Marshall Bennett's signature, I will make this hospital famous in a way your donors will not enjoy." There are many kinds of silence. That one was productive. Within minutes, calls were made. The proxy was verified. The DNR was suspended, then formally revoked under Elias's authority. My code status was changed back. Full code, full treatment, full chance. That is the phrase that still matters to me. Full chance. Not guaranteed recovery. Not miracle. Not some shiny, inspirational poster with a sunset and a quote nobody asked for. Just a chance. Sometimes, that is the most valuable thing a person can fight for. Marshall found out at 7 in the morning. He came in expecting compliance and coffee. Instead, he found Elias standing outside my ICU room with a paper cup in his hand, looking like judgment had taken human form and skipped breakfast. My father stopped so fast, Beverly nearly walked into him. "What are you doing here?" Marshall demanded. Elias took a sip of coffee. "Saving your daughter." "Awkward." "I know," Beverly gasped. "Elias, this is a private family matter." He looked at her. "Beverly, you made it a legal matter when you let him sign a death order over a woman who chose someone else to protect her." Marshall's face went red. She was not thinking clearly when she signed that. She was in nursing school, Elias said, which means she was thinking more clearly than anyone in this hallway. My father stepped closer. "You have no idea what her condition is." "I read the chart." "You read the chart?" "I am her proxy." That is what responsible adults do before making decisions. That landed exactly where it needed to. For the first time, Marshall looked less like a grieving father and more like a man whose shortcut had been blocked by a locked gate. He lowered his voice. "You always hated this family." Elias smiled without warmth. "No, Marshall, I hated what you called family when you needed free labor. Free money. Or silence. Pat told me later she had to walk away because she was not supposed to enjoy it." My mother began crying again. Softer this time. "We are all just trying to do what is best for Audra," she said. Elias looked through the glass at me. Tubes. Machines. Bruise. A body still fighting. "No," he said. "Audra is trying to do what is best for Audra. The rest of you are trying to manage the inconvenience." That was the first time in my life someone said it plainly. I wish I had been awake to hear it. My body kept working through the next 72 hours. Not beautifully. Recovery is not pretty. It is swelling going down by inches. Numbers improving slowly. Doctors saying, cautiously optimistic, like they are afraid hope might sue them. Nurses adjusting tubes. Checking pupils. Turning your body so your skin does not break down. Cleaning you with more tenderness than some relatives bring to your bedside. Elias stayed. He did not perform grief. He did not make speeches. He sat in a hard chair with legal pads and bad coffee, reading every page of my chart. Sometimes he spoke to me like I was awake. "Audra, your father is still an idiot." That sort of thing. Comfort comes in different packaging. On the 3rd morning, they began lowering my sedation. The world returned badly. First, sound. A monitor beeping. The ventilator rhythm. Shoes on tile. Then pain arrived. Rude and confident. My chest hurt. My throat burned. My head felt packed with wet cement. I tried to move and discovered my body had become a committee that refused to vote. Someone touched my hand. "Audra," Pat said. "You are safe. You are at Northbridge Regional. Don't fight the tube." Safe. That word reached me before the rest did. I forced my eyes open. The ceiling was white. Too bright. Hospital ceiling tiles. I knew them. I hated them. I trusted them. Pat's face appeared above me. There she is, she said. Easy. Honey, you scared the paperwork out of us. If I could have laughed, I would have. Instead, my eyes watered from the tube and the effort of staying present. Doctor. Harlan checked me. Commands. Blink. Squeeze. Follow my finger. I did what I could, not much. Enough. Elias came in a few minutes later. He stood beside the bed, and for once, he had no sarcastic remark ready. His face looked older than I remembered. I squeezed his fingers, barely. But I did it. His mouth tightened. Good, he said quietly. Very good. That was Elias for I love you. They extubated me later that day. It was unpleasant, undignified, and medically necessary, which describes a lot of hospital life. My voice came out like sandpaper. Water? I whispered. Pat gave me ice chips instead. Because nurses are generous, but not reckless. The first thing I asked after that was not about the accident, it was, my parents? Pat and Elias exchanged a look. I knew that look. Nurses use it when the answer is complicated, and nobody wants to be the first person to ruin your afternoon. They are here, Elias said. I closed my eyes. Some pain is physical. Some pain walks into the hallway wearing your last name. Later, when I was drifting in and out, I heard them outside my room. The door was not fully closed. My mother's voice came first. We need to be careful. If she recovers enough to talk, this becomes difficult. Not thank God she is awake. Not my baby survived. Difficult. Then Kinsley, sharp and irritated. What about the venue deposit? Daddy said the life insurance would cover it if things went the other way. My heart monitor gave one hard beep. Pat looked at me. I kept my face still. Nurse Audra, calm under pressure. Marshall answered in a low voice. Keep your voice down. The policy is still valid. But she has to actually pass for it to pay. And Elias is sniffing around everything now. Kinsley made a disgusted little sound. So my wedding is just on hold because Audra decided to wake up? There it was. My resurrection. Apparently. Had scheduling issues. My mother whispered, Sweetheart, nobody is saying that. Kinsley said, You're all thinking it. No one corrected her. Then my father said the sentence that finished something inside me. We wait. If she is impaired, we can still control the situation. I stared at the ceiling. For years, I had mistaken exhaustion for duty. I had believed that if I gave enough, paid enough, forgave enough, my family would one day look at me and see a daughter instead of a resource. But lying in that hospital bed, with my chest stitched and my throat raw, I finally understood. They did see me clearly. That was the problem. They saw the nurse, the paycheck, the insurance policy, the obstacle, the quiet daughter who cleaned up messes and asked for nothing. They simply did not see a person they were required to love. Elias stepped into the hallway. His voice was calm, dangerously calm. I would choose your next words very carefully. The hallway went silent, and for the first time since the crash, I felt something stronger than pain move through me. Not rage, not grief. Decision. The DNR form had been meant to end my life. Instead, it had just given me proof of who my family really was. That decision settled in my chest before my body was strong enough to sit up. I could barely lift a cup without my hand shaking. My ribs protested every breath. My voice sounded like I had swallowed gravel and washed it down with hospital disinfectant. But inside, something had gone still in the way a room goes, still right before a surgeon makes the first cut. I was done being useful to people who only loved me when I was convenient. The funny thing about being an ICU nurse is that recovery does not impress you just because it is emotional. I knew what my body was doing. I knew the difference between a good sign and a miracle story somebody's aunt would post on Facebook with too many exclamation points. My progress was real, but it was ugly and slow in all the normal ways. I had to relearn breathing, without panicking when my chest tightened. I had to let physical therapy help me sit on the edge of the bed like I was climbing Mount Everest in a hospital gown that opened in the back, because dignity, apparently, is optional in American healthcare. I had to accept ice chips, pain meds, Scans, blood draws, neurochecks, and Pat Morales telling me, don't be heroic. Heroic patients fall down. Pat was right. Pat was usually right. Elias stayed close. Not sentimental close. He was not the kind of man who patted your hand and called you sweetheart. He was the kind of man who reviewed your chart, questioned a medication delay, found 3 errors in hospital paperwork, and then brought you soup from a place that charged too much because he said hospital broth was a hate crime against vegetables. That was love in the Bennett family. If you knew where to look. My parents were allowed supervised visits for a while. That was Elias's idea. Not mine. We need to observe behavior, he said. I stared at him from my bed. You sound like we're studying raccoons. Raccoons have better family structure. He had a point. Marshall came in first, wearing the face of a man rehearsing concern in an elevator mirror. Beverly followed with flowers so large they looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. Kinsley did not come. She was, according to my mother, too emotionally fragile. I had been hit by an SUV, placed on a ventilator, nearly written off by my own father. And somehow Kinsley needed the emotional bubble wrap. Classic. My father stood beside my bed and said, Odra, you gave us quite a scare. I looked at him. My throat still hurt. So I used my words carefully. I heard you. His face changed, only for a second, but I saw it. Beverly's smile froze. Honey, you were heavily medicated. You may have misunderstood things. That was my mother's favorite move. If reality made her uncomfortable, she called it confusion and hoped everyone would behave. I turned my head toward her. I heard enough. Marshall stepped forward. This is not the time for accusations. No, I whispered. It's the time for rest. Then I closed my eyes. Not because I was weak, because I was done giving them a stage. Elias escorted them out. By the next day, their visits became less frequent, then shorter. Then they stopped pretending they came for me at all. That was when Elias started moving. Quietly, he had already revoked the DNR. He had already notified hospital administration that all decisions went through him. He had already requested copies of every document Marshall had touched. Now he began planning my discharge like he was extracting a witness. Which, in a way, he was. Your apartment is not secure, he told me. My apartment has 2 locks and a neighbor who watches everybody through the blinds. Your father has keys. I hated that he was right. Marshall had a spare. So did Beverly. I had given them copies years ago when I still thought family access was the same thing as trust. It is not. That is one lesson I would hand to every older person watching this. A spare key is not a symbol of love if the person holding it does not respect your door. Elias arranged for me to be discharged to his estate outside Potomac. Not a mansion in the silly movie sense, but close enough that I made fun of him for it. It had a long driveway, a brick guest house, old trees, a library that smelled like leather and dust, and security cameras tucked in places only an attorney with enemies would think to put them. The hospital records showed I was transferred to a private rehabilitation facility. Technically true. The guest house had medical equipment, a visiting nurse, a physical therapist, and Pat Morales on speed dial. Elias called it home care. I called it witness protection with better sheets. We did not tell my parents. I expected them to notice. They did not. That was the part that should have hurt more than it did. Marshall and Beverly were busy managing the version of my life that benefited them. According to Elias's investigator, my father told relatives I was not expected to make a meaningful recovery. My mother told her garden club I was between this world and the next, which sounded spiritual until you realized she was saying it over catered tea while accepting sympathy envelopes. Sympathy envelopes. Yes, actual checks. Apparently, wealthy people do not bring casseroles. They bring donations with tasteful cards. My parents created a private support fund for medical and family expenses. No public website. Nothing that would leave too wide a trail. Just quiet phone calls. Soft voices. And the kind of emotional pressure that makes people reach for checkbooks. Marshall told one cousin I was nearly brain dead. Nearly. A very useful word. It sounds medical while meaning whatever the liar needs it to mean. Meanwhile, I was in Elias's guest house learning how to walk across a room without needing to sit down like a 90-year-old church deacon after mowing the lawn in July. I should say something here because it matters. Revenge was not what kept me going. Not at first. What kept me going was the simple, stubborn desire to be able to wash my own hair, to button my own shirt, to stand at a sink and brush my teeth without feeling like I had run a marathon. When people talk about surviving, they often skip the small humiliations, but recovery is built from them. The first time I made it from the bed to the guest house kitchen without help, I cried. Not pretty crying. Annoyed crying. Then I made toast. It was slightly burned. I ate it like a victory meal. Elias stood in the doorway and said, "You know, most people celebrate with champagne. I'm on pain medication. Toast it is. Bit by bit. My body returned to me. So did my mind. And with my mind came questions. Where were my belongings? Who had my purse? Had anyone secured my apartment? Why had my mother asked about my lease? Why had Kinsley not once called to hear my voice?" Elias did not answer quickly. That was how I knew the answers were bad. One afternoon, I sat in his study wrapped in a cardigan, my ribs taped, my laptop open on the desk. The room had built-in shelves, a heavy wooden table, and one of those leather chairs that makes you feel like you should be reading a will or disappointing a senator. Elias walked in with a tablet. "You are not going to like this. I haven't liked anything since the SUV. Fair." He placed the tablet in front of me. Kinsley was live. The video showed a sunlit garden behind my parents' house. White flowers. Champagne glass. Linen tabs. A string quartet. Because apparently, grief now came with violin accompaniment. Across the top of the live stream was the title, "A Tribute to My Sister and a Celebration of Love." I stared at it. "A tribute," I said. Elias stood beside me. "It gets worse." Of course it did. Kinsley stepped into frame, wearing a pale blue dress and the expression of someone auditioning for sadness. Around her neck was a vintage Chanel necklace. My vintage Chanel necklace. Grandma Margaret had given it to me when I graduated nursing school. Not Kinsley. Me. Grandma had pressed the box into my hands and said, "You chose work that matters. Wear this when you need to remember you have value outside what this family asks from you." I had kept it in my apartment, tucked in a velvet case inside my dresser. Now it was resting against Kinsley's collarbone while she smiled sadly at a camera. The room seemed to tilt, even though I was sitting still. "She went into my apartment," I said. Elias did not soften it. "Yes." On the screen, Kinsley lifted her champagne glass. "My sister Audra has always been the quiet strength in our family," she said. I laughed once. It hurt my ribs. "Quiet strength," I repeated. "That's a cute way to say unpaid staff." Kinsley continued, her voice trembling in the fake way people use when they have practiced in the mirror. "Even though she cannot be here with us today, I know she would want love to continue. She would want joy. She would want this family to move forward." There it was again. My wishes. Everyone seemed very comfortable announcing what I wanted while making sure I was not in the room to object. Beverly appeared beside her, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that looked completely dry. "My Audra was always giving for," she said. "Was, not is, was." Marshall stood behind them, one hand on Kinsley's shoulder, his face arranged into noble sorrow. He looked like a man accepting an award for surviving an inconvenience. Then the camera panned across a table. There were framed pictures of me. Graduation. Hospital badge photo. A family Christmas where I had paid for half the catering and somehow still ended up washing dishes. Beside the photos was a donation box. A tasteful white donation box. For Audra's care, my care. I was sitting in a leather chair 12 miles away watching my family raise money for a patient they had tried to let die. For a few seconds, I did not speak. That worried Elias more than yelling would have. He studied my face. "Audra." I lifted one hand. "I'm fine." "You are not fine." "No," I said. "But I am clear." On the screen, Kinsley turned slightly, and the necklace caught the sunlight. That tiny flash did something to me. The DNR form had been the first betrayal made visible. My father's steady signature. My mother's silence. A paper death warrant dressed up as practicality. But this was different. This was not panic. This was planning. They had entered my home, touched my things, stolen from a woman they were publicly mourning before she was dead. They had taken Grandma Margaret's necklace and placed it around Kinsley's throat like my life had already been divided into party favors. I looked at Elias. I want my apartment secured. Already sent someone. I want a list of everyone who donated. Working on it. I want copies of every bank account I helped manage for them. He paused. That was the first time I saw approval break through his tired face. There she is, he said. I watched Kinsley laugh at something off camera, then quickly rearrange her face into sadness when she remembered people were watching. My sister was drinking champagne at my tribute. My parents were collecting sympathy. And I was supposed to be fading quietly somewhere. Too damaged to speak, I closed the livestream. Not because I could not bear to watch. Because I had seen enough. The guest house was silent around me. Outside the study windows, the afternoon light sat calmly on the lawn. My body still hurt. My voice was still weak. I could not drive, work, or walk far without help. But for the first time since the crash, I felt the old ICU steadiness return. Assess the damage. Stabilize the patient. Remove the threat. Only this time, the patient was my own life. And the threat had my last name. The threat had my last name, which made it harder to face and easier to underestimate. That is something people do not warn you about. When danger comes from a stranger, your mind knows what to call it. Theft, fraud, abuse, threat. But when danger comes from family, especially parents, your brain starts negotiating with the facts like a tired salesman trying to save a bad deal. Maybe they panicked. Maybe they were confused. Maybe they did not understand. Maybe it was not as bad as it looked. No, it was exactly as bad as it looked. And once I accepted that, I stopped trying to feel better and started trying to get accurate. That was where Nurse Audra helped me again. In the ICU, feelings matter, but facts save lives. You can care deeply about a patient and still need the blood pressure, oxygen level, lab results, medication history, and a timeline that makes sense. You do not treat a crisis by guessing. You assess. So I assessed my family. Elias gave me the guest house study for the afternoon. He set a mug of tea beside my laptop and told me not to overdo it, which was rich coming from a man who once worked through pneumonia because he had a hearing. I mean it, he said. 1 hour. Sure. He narrowed his eyes. That means 1 actual hour, not 1 nurse hour. A nurse hour is different. It starts as 60 minutes and somehow becomes 4 hours. No meal. No bathroom break. And a headache you pretend is fine. I'll behave, I said. I have never seen evidence of that. He left the door open, which was his version of hovering. The first thing I did was log into the family accounts. That sentence alone should tell you too much. For years, I had managed things my father claimed were beneath his time or too annoying. Online bill pay, insurance renewals, password resets, property tax reminders, medical forms, subscription cancellations, airline miles. If there was a login, a deadline, or a customer service representative with a hold time longer than 12 minutes, somehow it became Audra's job. Marshall could discuss market trends at dinner for 45 minutes, but ask him to reset a password, and suddenly, he became a pioneer, crossing the Oregon Trail. Because I had handled everything, I knew where to look. First, my own checking account. The balance made no sense. I stared at the screen, then refreshed it. Still wrong. My savings had been almost $85,000 before the crash. I had built that money slowly. Night shifts, holiday shifts, overtime, skipped vacations, a used car instead of a new one, store-brand cereal when Kinsley was posting brunch photos with mimosas that cost more than my weekly groceries. That money was not glamorous, but it was mine. Now most of it was gone. There were transfers I had not authorized. $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, then smaller amounts, like someone trying to make the theft look less greedy after already failing at morality. The destination account was familiar. Bennett Family Management, LLC, my father's little shell company for household structuring. That was what he called it. The rest of us called it Marshall's drawer for money he did not want questioned. My hands went cold. I clicked into the documents attached to the bank alerts. There it was. Power of attorney. My name. My address. My signature, except it was not my signature. It was close enough to fool someone who had never watched me sign a discharge instruction at 3 in the morning while holding a cup of cold coffee in my other hand. But I knew my own handwriting. The A was wrong. The pressure was wrong. The slant was forced. Marshall had forged it. While I was in the ICU, while I had a tube in my throat, while my body was fighting to stay alive, my father had been busy giving himself permission to rob me. I did not cry. That surprised me. The Audra from 6 months earlier might have cried. She would have tried to make emotional sense of it. She would have asked how a father could do that to his own child. She would have sat in the hurt until it swallowed the useful parts of her. But the woman sitting in Elias's study had already seen the DNR. The forged power of attorney was not a shock. It was confirmation. I took screenshots. Date, time, transfer amounts, account numbers, document upload history. I created a folder on the laptop and named it Evidence. Simple. Clean. No drama. The folder did not need a poetic title. Federal prosecutors, as I understand it, prefer boring labels. Elias returned 20 minutes later and looked at my face. What did you find? I turned the laptop toward him. He leaned over the screen. The room became very quiet. That is how I knew it was bad. Elias usually made a dry comment within 10 seconds of seeing something stupid. When he stayed silent, the stupid had crossed into criminal. Marshall forged a power of attorney, I said. Elias looked closer and used it to move funds. $85,000. His jaw tightened. Across state lines? The receiving account is registered in Delaware. He straightened slowly. Well, he said. That was generous of him. I looked up. Generous? He took a family betrayal and gift-wrapped it for federal jurisdiction. That should not have made me smile. It did anyway. Pain does strange things to your sense of humor. Elias asked me to stop touching the accounts until he could preserve everything properly. He contacted a forensic accountant he trusted. A woman named Marlene, who sounded on the phone like she ate tax fraud for breakfast. Within an hour, we had a secure drive, a document list, and instructions that made me feel like I had wandered into the boring but satisfying part of a crime show. Marlene found more. A credit card in my name with charges from luxury bridal boutiques, a hotel deposit, a florist, a private tasting menu. Kinsley's wedding was being built on my coma, not my death. Exactly. My coma. That was an important distinction. They had not waited for grief. They had monetized uncertainty. There were also withdrawals from the so-called support fund. Donations meant for my care had paid for Beverly's travel wardrobe, Marshall's country club balance, and Kinsley's engagement photographer. I stared at the spreadsheet Marlene sent over. You have to admire the efficiency, I said. Elias looked at me. That is a deeply unhealthy sentence. I'm a nurse. We cope weird. No argument. By evening, my body was done. My ribs ached. My head throbbed. The scars along my chest pulled whenever I shifted in the chair. But my mind would not stop. Once you start finding rot under the floorboards, you do not casually step away and make a sandwich. I remembered something. My father's laptop. Elias frowned. What about it? I used to fix it for him. He saves everything locally because he thinks the cloud is where hackers live. That is not how that works. You know that. I know that. Marshall once printed an email and asked me how to reply on paper. Elias pinched the bridge of his nose. Continue. He backs up to an external drive. Blue case. He keeps it in his home office. Second drawer on the left. Under old tax folders. Elias studied me. You managed their digital life for years. I managed their actual life for years. Digital was just the part with passwords. He made a call. By then, Elias had already sent a licensed investigator to secure my apartment and document what had been taken. Now he sent the same investigator to obtain records from the family house through legal channels I did not ask him to explain in detail. That is another thing age teaches you. Sometimes you do not need the whole recipe. You just need to know dinner is safe. The drive arrived the next morning. Blue case. Second drawer. Old tax folders. Marshall was nothing if not predictable. We did not hack anything. I want that clear. I knew the password because my father had used the same one for years. Even after I told him not to. It was Kinsley's birthday, followed by an exclamation point. Of course it was. Elias connected the drive to a clean computer. Folders appeared. Taxes, insurance, household, Kinsley wedding, Audra medical. That one made my stomach tighten. Inside were hospital estimates, insurance notes, scanned forms, and a copy of the forged power of attorney. Then I saw another folder. Contingency. Just one word. Cold. Practical. Marshall. I clicked it. Elias did not stop me. Inside was a draft complaint against Northbridge Regional Medical Center. The title alone made my skin go cold. Failure to honor patient, end-of-life directive. I read the first page, then the second. Then I stopped because I understood. My father had been preparing to sue the hospital. Not for harming me. Not for failing to save me. For failing to let me die. The complaint claimed emotional distress, financial hardship, violation of family decision-making rights. It argued that the hospital's refusal to honor the DNR had caused unnecessary prolongation of suffering and significant damages to the surviving family structure. Surviving family structure. That meant them, not me. I pushed the laptop away. For the first time all day, my hands shook. Elias moved the computer back toward himself and read in silence, page after page. His expression settled into something I had never seen before. Not anger. Disgust was too small a word. Finally, he said. He drafted this while you were alive. I nodded. While I was improving? Elias closed the folder. The room felt colder than it had a minute before. I looked down at my own hands. Hands that had started IVs. Held pressure on bleeding wounds. Checked pulses. Cleaned patients. Comforted spouses. Charted through exhaustion. Hands that had spent years helping people survive. My father had used his hands to sign a DNR, then forge my name, then draft a lawsuit because the first document had failed to finish the job. That was the moment the DNR form changed in my mind. It was no longer only a symbol of what they had tried to take from me. It was a map of motive, money, timing, intent. Marshall thought paperwork made him powerful. He forgot paperwork also leaves trails. I looked at Elias. I want every page copied. Already happening. I want the bank records preserved. They will be. I want my apartment inventoried. Done. And I want my necklace back. For some reason, that last sentence made his face soften. We will get it back. I leaned into the chair, exhausted down to the bones. But clear. My family had turned my coma into a business plan. Fine. I was about to turn their business plan into evidence. That sounded brave in Elias's study. With bank records on the screen and a lawyer in the room. It sounded clean, controlled, almost satisfying. Then my body reminded me that I was still held together by stitches, medication, and stubbornness. I stood up too fast and nearly folded like a cheap lawn chair. Elias caught my elbow. Sit down. I'm fine. You are swaying. I'm emotionally upright. Your body disagrees. He helped me back into the leather chair with the careful patience of a man who had never raised children but had negotiated with difficult judges. The difference, from what I could tell, was small. I hated needing help, not because help was bad. Help can save your life. I knew that better than anyone. But after years of being the person everyone leaned on, needing help felt like showing up to work without shoes. Elias poured me water and set 2 pills beside the glass. Pain medication, he said. I know what it is. Then stop glaring at it like it owes you money. I took the pills, slowly. Because proving a point is less fun when your ribs feel like they are filing a complaint with management. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The laptop screen still showed the evidence folder. Transfers, forged power of attorney, donation records, the draft lawsuit, my father's neat little paper trail of greed. Then Elias closed the laptop. There is something else, he said. I looked at him. Those 4 words should come with a warning label. Nothing good ever follows there is something else. It is never. There is something else. And it's a basket of muffins. It is always a tumor. A secret child. Unpaid taxes. Or, in my case, apparently, another family betrayal, dressed in legal clothing. What now? I asked. Elias sat across from me. For once, he did not look sarcastic. He looked careful. It is about your grandmother. That got my attention. Grandma Margaret Bennet had been the only person in our family who loved without keeping score. She was sharp, practical, and absolutely impossible to impress with money. She lived in an old brick house with squeaky stairs, made terrible coffee, and once told my father that net worth is not the same thing as worth. Marshall, though I see how the words confused you, I loved her for that. She died 3 years before the crash. My father had handled the estate. Or, so he claimed. We were told there were complications. Delays. Taxes. Boring things. Kinsley got jewelry. My parents kept using Grandma's house for family purposes. I received a handwritten recipe box and a small framed photograph of Grandma in her nursing volunteer uniform from the 70s. I had treasured both. I had not asked questions. That was becoming a theme in my life. And not one I was proud of. What about Grandma? I said. Elias folded his hands. Margaret did not leave her estate to Marshall. I stared at him. What? She created a trust. I waited for more. Elias reached into a folder and pulled out a document. Not a copy this time. A formal trust summary with Grandma's full legal name at the top. Margaret Elaine Bennett Revocable Trust. My mouth went dry. Why didn't I know about this? Because your father did not want you to know. Simple answer. Terrible answer? Elias continued. Your grandmother knew Marshall would try to control the assets. She also knew he favored Kinsley. And she was not blind to how he treated you. I looked away. That hurt in a strange way. Not because Grandma saw it. Because I had spent so many years pretending it was invisible. Elias slid the document closer. She left the main estate in trust. The house, investment accounts, and several properties. Total value is approximately $4 million. Depending on current market values. $4 million. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the number was so large it felt fake. Like something shouted on a game show. Grandma Margaret had $4 million? She lived simply. Invested well. Did not marry idiots after your grandfather died. That helped. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. Where does that money go? His eyes stayed on mine. Primarily to you. The room changed. Not physically. The same shelves. Same desk. Same afternoon light. Same pain under my ribs. But something in the air shifted so sharply I could almost hear it. To me, I repeated. Yes. That makes no sense. It made perfect sense to Margaret. I shook my head. Kinsley was the favorite. With your parents, Elias said. Not with everyone. That sentence landed harder than I expected. I had spent most of my life assuming the family ranking system was universal. Kinsley first. Audra useful. Audra steady. Audra available. Audra last. Unless a bill needed paying. But Grandma had seen a different order. Elias tapped the document. There is a clause. Margaret called it the Audra clause. Of course she did. Grandma loved plain names. Her recipe box had cards labeled things like good soup and cake Beverly pretends she made. What does it say? I asked. The trust activates for your benefit if you reach age 30 or experience a verified life-altering medical event before then. I stared at him. My birthday is in 6 months. I know. And the crash qualifies. My chest tightened. But this time it was not from injury. It was understanding. Marshall had not just been trying to avoid medical bills, he had been trying to beat a clause. Elias, let me get there on my own. He was good that way. Annoying. But good, I whispered. He knew. Yes. He knew about the trust. Yes. He knew if I survived the accident, the trust would activate for me. Yes. And if I died? Elias's face hardened. If you died before activation, Marshall had a route to challenge the distribution and redirect much of the estate toward Kinsley through a secondary family provision. Not guaranteed. But possible? Expensive. Messe. Still possible. I leaned back very carefully. The pain medicine had softened the edges of my ribs. But nothing could soften that. My father had not looked at me in the ICU and seen only cost. He had seen an obstacle. A living obstacle. I thought about him in that consultation room. Steady hand on the DNR form. Let her go. Not said in shock. Not said after weeks of hopelessness. Said early. Said fast. Because if I did not wake up, Marshall could move. $4 million. A house. investments, Grandma's legacy, Kinsley's wedding, his pride, all waiting on one inconvenient fact: me breathing. I closed my eyes. In the ICU, I had seen families make devastating decisions. Real ones. Merciful ones. I had watched spouses release hands they had held for 50 years because love meant not forcing a body to suffer past hope. I had watched adult children sob in hallways because there was no good option. Only the least cruel one. That kind of decision leaves people broken. My father had treated mine like a financial strategy. That difference matters. For anyone listening, especially if you are older and have children, paperwork is not cold. Paperwork is protection. A healthcare proxy. A will. A trust. A beneficiary form. A spare key list. A password plan. These things are not about mistrust. They are about making sure the right person has authority when the wrong person has confidence. Grandma understood that. I was only beginning to. How did Marshall keep this hidden? I asked. Elias sihilt. By doing what Marshall does. Acting official. Telling half-truths. Delaying. Using the house as if it were his. Borrowing against things he should not have touched. Assuming you would never challenge him. I opened my eyes. He was right about that last part. Elias looked at me. He used to be. That was the difference. Used to be. I sat with those words for a long time. The old Audra would have felt guilty. $4 million would have sounded like something too large for me to deserve. I would have thought of Kinsley's feelings. My mother's panic. My father's rage. I would have looked for a way to soften the truth so nobody had to face the full shape of what they had done. But I was tired of making pillows for other people's consequences. Grandma had made a choice. A legal choice. A loving choice. A choice my father tried to erase. I want to read the whole trust. I said. You will. I want to know everything he borrowed against. You should. And I want the trustee notified that I'm alive. Aware. And represented. Elias almost smiled. Already drafted? Of course it is. I had hoped you would get there. You could have told me earlier. I could have. He said. But you needed to be strong enough to hear it. I wanted to argue. I did not. Because he was right. And I hated when people were right in a way that helped me. The next few days became a strange mix of recovery and discovery. In the mornings, I practiced walking with a physical therapist named Denise, who had the cheerful cruelty of someone who believes stairs build character. She made me walk the guest house hallway. Then the patio. Then part of the driveway. Small steps. She kept saying. I told her small steps were overrated. She told me falling was more overrated. In the afternoons, Elias and Marlene walked me through records. The trust, bank statements, property documents, insurance, the support fund, the forged power of attorney, the draft lawsuit. A pattern emerged so clearly it made my skin crawl. Marshall had been tightening his grip for years. Not suddenly. Not in one desperate moment after my accident. Years. He had expected Grandma's estate to pass through him. When it did not, he treated the trust like a temporary inconvenience. He borrowed, delayed, manipulated, and waited for one of two things. My 30th birthday, or my death. The accident had given him a chance to force the second option. Then Pat found the proxy. Elias arrived, and I woke up. Marshall's whole plan had depended on me being silent. That was his mistake. One evening, as I sat in the study with a blanket over my legs and a legal pad in front of me, an envelope arrived by courier. Cream paper, heavy stock, my name written in calligraphy. Audra Bennett. For one wild second, I thought it might be from someone kind. A former patient's family. A co-worker. A distant relative who had heard I was alive and wanted to send a card. Then I opened it. Inside was an invitation. The Bennett family requests the honor of your presence in spirit as we celebrate the life of Audra Claire Bennett and the engagement of Kinsley Rose Bennett to Preston Whitaker. I read it twice. Not because I did not understand. Because my brain refused to accept that even my family could be this tacky. A memorial and engagement gala. Together. Same evening. Same ballroom. Same invitation. Apparently. Nothing says romance like using your not-dead sister as emotional lighting. Elias took the card from my hand and read it. His expression went flat. The Pierre Hotel, he said. New York City. Of course. If Beverly was going to fake grief, She wanted good chandeliers. The invitation continued with phrases like, honoring Audra's generous spirit and celebrating Kinsley's future. There was a note suggesting that, in lieu of flowers, guests could contribute to the Audra Bennett Family Medical Fund. I almost admired the nerve. Almost. They think I'm still hidden away, I said. They think you are incapacitated. They want to announce my passing. They are preparing the room for it. And Kinsley's marriage. Yes. I looked at the invitation again. There are moments when anger burns hot. This was not one of them. This anger was cold, focused, useful. The DNR form had started as a death warrant. The forged power of attorney had shown the theft. The trust had revealed the motive, and now this invitation gave us the stage. I set the cream card on the desk. For the first time since the crash, I smiled without pain. Tell me, I said. How much trouble can we cause at the Pierre Hotel without getting arrested? Elias looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled too. The correct question, he said, is how much truth can we tell before they wish they had stayed home? That sentence stayed with me all the way to New York. I did not sleep much the night before the gala. Not because I was scared of my parents. By then, fear had become too small for what I felt. Fear is what you feel when you think someone still has power over you. What I felt was sharper, cleaner. I was preparing to walk into a room where my family had already buried me for profit. That requires a certain kind of focus. Elias arranged everything with the quiet efficiency of a man who had spent decades making powerful people regret underestimating paperwork. He had copies of the DNR form, copies of the forged power of attorney, bank transfers, the trust documents, the donation records, the draft lawsuit Marshall had prepared against the hospital for the terrible crime of keeping me alive. Marlene, the forensic accountant, had built a timeline so neat it could have made a judge weep with gratitude. I had one job: stay calm. That sounds simple until you are putting on a black suit with bruises still fading under your blouse and a thin scar tugging beneath your collar. My body was better, but not healed. I could walk on my own. As long as nobody expected speed, grace, or stairs designed by sadists. I still tired quickly. My ribs still reminded me they had been through an argument with an SUV and lost. Denise, my physical therapist, had approved the trip with conditions. You sit when you need to sit, she said. I know. You do not try to prove anything. I know. You do not stand for an hour in dress shoes just because you are mad. I would never. She looked at me over her glasses. I see hid. Fine. I might. Then wear flats. So, I wore flats. There is dignity in survival. But there is also dignity in not face-planting in a hotel ballroom. The Pierre Hotel sat on Fifth Avenue, looking exactly like the kind of place Beverly Bennett would choose for public grief. Elegant. Expensive. Polished enough to make bad behavior feel historical. The chandeliers alone probably had better insurance than my first car. The event was listed as a private family memorial and engagement celebration. That phrase still made my eye twitch. A memorial and engagement celebration. For me and Kinsley, nothing says family values like mixing your daughter's supposed death with past hors d'oeuvres and a champagne toast to the golden child. Elias did not bring me through the front entrance. That would come later. Instead, we entered through the service side. I knew that world better than my parents ever imagined. In college, before nursing consumed my life, I had worked catering jobs to pay for books, scrubs, and the 1,000 little expenses my parents called character building when they did not want to help. I had carried trays through hotel kitchens, learned where staff elevators were hidden, and understood that every fancy event depends on people the guests pretend not to see. That was perfect. The invisible see everything. A woman named Carla met us near the staff corridor. She was the event operations manager. And from the way she looked at Elias, I guessed he had already explained enough to make her cautious, but not enough to make her ask questions. You'll stay behind the AV booth until the signal fem, Carla said. Her eyes flicked to me. Not pity. Good. I was tired of pity. You okay walking? She asked. Yes, Elias answered at the same time, slowly. I glared at him. He ignored me. Carla handed me a staff jacket, plain black, and a lanyard that said event support. I put it on over my suit. My hair was pulled back low, Minimal makeup. No jewelry. Not even earrings. Kinsley still had my Chanel necklace. Not for long. The ballroom was already glowing when we slipped inside through a side corridor. Soft gold light. White flowers everywhere. Tall arrangements on every table. Probably chosen by someone who used the word timeless while charging by the stem. A string quartet played near the far wall. A photographer moved around, capturing grief at flattering angles. There were nearly 200 guests. My father's old business contacts. My mother's charity friends. Kinsley's social circle. People from country clubs. Foundation boards. And families who used summer as a verb. I stood in the shadow near the AV booth and watched them drink champagne under my name. A large framed photo of me sat near the stage. It was my hospital badge photo. Of all the pictures they could have used, they chose the one from work. My hair was tied back. My face was tired. My smile was small but real. I remembered that day. I had just finished a night shift and gone straight to employee ID because my old badge had cracked. I looked like myself. That made me angrier than if they had chosen something polished. Beside the photo was a white donation box. Again, Audra Bennett Family Medical Fund. The words sat there in elegant script. Pretending theft had manners. Beverly moved through the room in a navy dress. Touching arms. Accepting embraces. Lowering her eyes at exactly the right moments. My mother had always been good at soft performance. She could make herself look fragile while stepping over someone bleeding on the floor. She was always so selfless. Beverly told a woman near the stage. There it was again. A woman dabbed her eyes. I remember Audra helping at your Christmas fundraiser. Beverly nodded. She never wanted attention. That was one way to phrase being ignored, another guest said. It is so brave of you to celebrate Kinsley tonight, too. My mother placed a hand over her heart. Joy and sorrow can sit at the same table. I nearly laughed out loud. That sounded like something printed on a sympathy candle. Marshall stood near the bar with Preston Whitaker. Kinsley's fiancé. Preston was tall, clean-cut, and looked like he came from a family where people said summer house, without irony. I had met him twice before the accident. He had seemed polite, maybe a little overwhelmed by the Bennett machine. Not cruel, just underinformed. My father had one hand on Preston's shoulder. Family legacy matters, Marshall said. I could not hear every word, but I saw enough. The confident posture, the generous smile, the fatherly act. Marshall was selling something, and Preston was the buyer. Then Kinsley entered. The room shifted toward her like flowers turning toward light. She wore a white gown. Not a wedding dress, but close enough to make the point. Her hair was swept back. Her makeup was perfect. Around her neck was my Chanel necklace. Grandma Margaret's necklace. My necklace. For a moment, all my careful calm narrowed to that small piece of gold at her throat. Ilias, standing behind me in the corridor shadow, said quietly, "Breathe." I am breathing. You are breathing like you are planning to intubate someone with a butter knife. I loosened my jaw. He was right. Kinsley stepped onto the small stage and took the microphone. "Thank you all for being here," she said. Her voice trembled. "Just enough. I know tonight is unusual." That was one word for it. But my sister Audra believed in love. She believed in family. She believed in moving forward even when life breaks your heart. I stared at her. My sister had not called me. Not once. Not when I was in the ICU. Not when I woke up. Not when she stole my necklace. But there she stood, telling a room of wealthy strangers what I believed. The confidence of people who never expect the truth to walk in. Kinsley looked toward my photo. Audra was quiet. She was practical. Sometimes she seemed distant. But we all knew she cared deeply. Translation: Audra did not clap loudly enough when Kinsley entered a room. A few people nodded. My mother cried. My father looked solemn. The photographer captured everything. Then Beverly took the microphone. My stomach tightened. "My Audra," she began, and stopped as if overcome. The room softened around her. Beverly was good, I had to admit it. She came into this world serious, my mother said. Even as a little girl, she wanted to fix everything. She took care of all of us. That part was true. That was what made it cruel. She would want us to be together tonight. She would want her sister to feel surrounded by love. and she would want her final wishes respected. My final wishes. I felt Elias shift behind me. On stage, Beverly looked straight toward the reporter near the front. A society columnist. According to the guest list, Elias had obtained. In fact, my mother continued, Audra told us many times that if anything ever happened to her, she wanted Kinsley to have what she left behind. Her jewelry, her savings, even what might come from Margaret's estate. Audra never cared about material things. That was new. The trust. She had just opened the door to the trust in public. Elias whispered, Thank you, Beverly. I looked back at him. He was smiling, not happily. Legally. Marshall stepped up next. He kissed Beverly's cheek, took the microphone, and gave the room a heavy pause. My father knew how to handle a crowd. He had spent his life in conference rooms, fundraisers, and private clubs. He understood pacing. He understood silence. He understood that if you speak slowly enough, some people mistake you for wise. Our family has endured an unimaginable trial, he said. I stood behind the AV booth. Very much imaginable. First, the terrible accident. Then the painful decisions no parent should ever have to face. Painful decisions. The DNR form was ready on the flash drive in my hand. I could feel the tiny plastic edge pressing into my palm. Marshall continued. We made those decisions with love, guided by what we believed Audra would have wanted. No. He made those decisions with a calculator in his chest. But tonight is also about hope. Kinsley and Preston remind us that life continues. That legacy continues. He turned toward Kinsley. One daughter lies beyond our reach. The other carries our future. The room murmured softly. I looked at the screen behind him. It displayed a slideshow titled, Sisters Through the Years. The first image showed me holding newborn Kinsley in a hospital chair. I was 3 years old, serious-faced, already trusted to hold someone smaller, while adults praised her for existing. Another photo appeared. Kinsley in a dance costume. Me in the background holding her bag. Another. Kinsley blowing out birthday candles. Me standing at the edge of the frame. Another. Kinsley, graduating college. Me smiling beside her. Exhausted because I had worked a night shift and driven 4 hours to be there. The slideshow was supposed to show sisterhood. It showed evidence, if you knew how to read it. Carla approached the booth and gave the AV technician a quiet instruction. The young man glanced at me, then at Elias, then stepped aside. I plugged in the drive. My hands were steady. That mattered to me, not because I felt nothing. I felt everything. The scar under my blouse, the ache in my ribs, the weight of Grandma's necklace around the wrong neck, the sound of Marshall's voice using love as a disguise for greed. But my hands were steady. Nurse Audra. Calm under pressure, Carla whispered. On your mark. Marshall lifted his glass. The screen behind him waited. I looked across the ballroom one last time. Beverly was dabbing her eyes. Kinsley was touching my necklace. Preston was smiling politely. Unaware his future in-laws had turned family betrayal into dinner theater, and my father stood in the center of it all. Confident that the dead do not correct the record. I gave Carla a small nod. The slideshow disappeared. For one clean second, the screen went black. Then the first image appeared. A high-resolution scan of the DNR form. Marshall Bennett's signature. The timestamp from the night I was fighting for my life. The ballroom went silent so fast even the string quartet stopped playing. That was the first honest sound of the evening. Silence. No violins helping Beverly cry on schedule. No champagne glasses clinking politely. No soft society laughter. Just 200 well-dressed people staring at a screen where my father's signature sat under the words, "Do not resuscitate." The DNR form looked enormous up there. A document that had once been tucked into my hospital chart like a quiet death sentence now filled the wall behind Marshall Bennett. Every line was clear. Every box. Every timestamp. Every neat little official mark that proved somebody had tried to make my survival optional. My father froze with his glass halfway raised. For 1 second, he looked genuinely confused. As if the truth had no right to attend an event without an invitation. Then his face changed. Not into guilt. Into calculation. I knew that face. I had seen it at family dinners, bank appointments, and every moment when Marshall Bennett needed to rearrange reality before anyone else could name it. He lowered the glass. The room stayed silent. Kinsley's hand went to the Chanel necklace at her throat. My necklace. Grandma Margaret's necklace. Her fingers closed around it like jewelry could become a shield. Beverly looked from the screen to Marshall, then to the guests, then back to the screen. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. That was rare for my mother. Usually, Beverly could produce a soft excuse faster than a church lady could produce a casserole. The scan on the screen shifted. Elias had arranged the presentation with the brutal neatness of an attorney who enjoyed clean evidence. The next slide zoomed in on Marshall's signature. Marshall Bennett. Strong, steady, confident. The timestamp sat beneath it. Signed while I was in critical condition. Signed before my prognosis was clear. Signed while I was still fighting for every breath. A murmur moved through the room. Marshall heard it. That was when he smiled. I have to give my father credit for one thing. The man never abandoned a performance just because the building was on fire. He gave a small laugh. Soft, controlled, insulted. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, turning toward the crowd. I apologize. It appears we are dealing with some kind of technical issue. No one laughed with him. He looked toward the AV booth. Someone has chosen a very cruel moment for a prank. The next slide appeared. Not the full form this time. A highlighted line from the consultation notes. Family expressed financial distress and concern regarding prolonged care. The murmur grew louder. Marshall's smile tightened. This is outrageous, he said. Private medical information has been stolen and manipulated. Elias stood behind me in the shadow of the side corridor. Predictable, he murmured. I did not move yet. Not because I was afraid. Because timing matters. In the ICU, you learn not to rush just because something looks dramatic. You watch the rhythm. You wait for the moment when intervention will do the most good. Too early, and people miss the point. Too late, and damage spreads. Marshall was still damaging himself, so I let him. He turned toward the society reporter near the front. My family is grieving. My younger daughter is celebrating a sacred milestone. Whoever did this should be ashamed. The word ashamed landed strangely in the room. People looked at the screen again. Then the next slide appeared. A quoted line. Highlighted in red. She's been a financial drain her whole life. Let her go. It had been pulled from Pat's documentation and Elias's sworn statement from the hospital staff interviews. Not a recording. Not some illegal trick. A written account. Supported by notes, time logs, and witness statements. Elias had been careful. Every piece had a legal foundation. The highlighted words sat behind my father like a verdict. Financial drain. Let her go. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Preston turned slowly toward Kinsley. Kinsley? He said. Not loudly. But the room was quiet enough that I heard it. She shook her head fast. I didn't know about that. That was interesting. Not, that isn't true. I didn't know about that. My father raised his voice. This is a fabrication. The next slide appeared. A bank transfer. Then another. Then another. Amounts moved from my savings into Bennett Family Management LLC. The dates lined up with my coma. A few guests stood from their chairs. Not leaving yet. Just needing their bodies to do something with the discomfort. Marshall pointed toward the booth. Turn that off. The AV technician looked at Carla. Carla looked at Elias. Elias did not blink. The screen stayed on. My mother finally found her voice. This is not the place, Beverly said. That almost made me step out early. Not the place. A ballroom filled with donors. Lies. Stolen jewelry. And a memorial invitation for a woman who was still breathing was apparently the wrong place for truth. How inconvenient truth can be when it ignores table settings. But I waited. Marshall tried another angle. This is a coordinated attack by a disgruntled relative, he said. My brother has always resented this family. Elias whispered. There it is. The next slide appeared. Healthcare proxy. Elias Bennett. Effective prior to accident. Notarized. Valid. That changed the room again. People were no longer watching a family slideshow gone wrong. They were watching a legal story unfold. The kind of story wealthy people understand because it involves documents, signatures, authority, and liability. Marshall's face reddened. My daughter was not competent when she signed that proxy. That was when I stepped forward. Not fast. I could not move fast even if I wanted to. My ribs still hated surprises. My legs were strong enough, but not proud. I walked from the shadow near the service corridor into the edge of the ballroom light, wearing the black staff jacket over my suit. My hair pulled back. My face pale but steady. At first, only a few people noticed. Then more heads turned. A woman gasped. Someone dropped a fork. The sound was tiny but clear. Kinsley saw me first among my family. Her face lost all color. Then Beverly saw me. Her hand flew to her chest in a move so practiced I almost admired the commitment. Marshall turned last. For the first time in my entire life, my father had no expression ready. I walked until I stood near the back center aisle. Not on the stage. Not beside him. Not begging for space. Just visible. Alive. The room stared. My voice was still rough from the ventilator. I could not project like a singer or a politician, but I had spent years speaking calmly over alarms, crying families, and doctors who thought volume made them right. I knew how to make a quiet voice carry. It's not a prank, Marshall, I said. It's a receipt. The word moved through the room. Receipt, plain, American, unfancy. Exactly what it was. Marshall's mouth opened. Nothing came out. So I helped him. For anyone here who has not had the pleasure of being declared practically dead while still having a pulse, my name is Audra Bennett. I am the daughter this event is supposedly honoring. I am also the patient attached to that DNR form. No one moved. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides because I did not want them to see shaking. And truthfully, they were not shaking. My body was tired. My chest hurt. But my hands were steady. My father signed that form while I was in a coma after a car accident. My medical team had not declared me beyond recovery. My healthcare proxy had not been consulted. In fact, my legal healthcare proxy was not my father at all. It was my uncle. Elias Bennett. Elias stepped into the light just enough for people to see him. A few guests recognized him. Good. My father also signed a withdrawal request. He told hospital staff I was a financial drain. Those were his words. Marshall snapped out of his shock. Audra, you are confused. There it was. The old family leash. Confused. Emotional. Misunderstanding. Difficult. I turned my head toward him. No. I'm not. I said it softly. That made it stronger. Beverly started toward me with her arms out. My baby. Thank God. I lifted one hand. She stopped. That tiny raised hand did what years of explaining had not. It created a boundary. You do not get to perform relief now, I said. Her face crumpled, but not enough. Not in the eyes. I had watched patients in real grief. Real grief empties people. Beverly was still checking the room. Kinsley took one small step back, still holding my necklace. I looked at her. Take it off. Her eyes widened. What? The necklace. Take it off. The room shifted toward her. Kinsley's cheeks flushed. Odraster. This is not mine, I said. That is the word you're looking for. Preston stared at the necklace. Then at Kinsley. You said your sister wanted you to have it. Kinsley swallowed. She did, Beverly said quickly. Audra. You were always generous with your sister. I looked at my mother. I was unconscious. That shut even Beverly up for a moment. Kinsley's fingers fumbled at the clasp. It took her too long. Maybe her hands were shaking. Maybe the clasp was difficult. Maybe Grandma Margaret was helping from wherever practical women go after death to watch idiots expose themselves. Finally, the necklace came free. A hotel staff member brought over a small tray without being asked. Bless service workers. They understand drama better than guests do. Kinsley placed the necklace on it. I did not touch it yet. I wanted it documented. The next slide appeared behind Marshall. The forged power of attorney. My signature enlarged beside my real signature from nursing school paperwork. The difference was obvious. A man near the bar muttered, Jesus. Marshall turned toward the screen, then back to me. You are making a terrible mistake. There it was. Not apology. Threat. I almost smiled. No, I said. The terrible mistake was assuming I would stay quiet because I always had. That line finally reached some people. I saw it in their faces. Older women especially. Women who had spent lifetimes being called dramatic for noticing what was obvious. Men who had seen inheritance bring out the worst in relatives. People who understood, maybe too well. That family can be the first place where someone learns how much disrespect they are expected to swallow. I took one more step forward. I did not come here to ruin Kinsley's engagement, I said. My family did that when they built it with stolen money. Stolen sympathy. And a stolen version of my final wishes. Preston's face hardened. Kinsley turned to him. Preston, don't listen to this. But he was listening. Everyone was. I looked at the donation box near my framed photo. That fund is not authorized by me. It was not used for my care. I am asking everyone who donated to provide records to my attorney. At the word attorney, Elias moved fully into view. He did not need to introduce himself. He looked like a lawsuit in a tailored coat. Marshall's voice dropped low. Audra. Enough. That tone had once worked on me. At 10. When I spilled juice on the rug. At 16. When I questioned why Kinsley got a car and I got a bus pass. At 24. When I asked why my paycheck kept solving problems I had not caused. Enough. It had always meant, stop making me uncomfortable. I looked at him under the chandeliers. With the DNR form still glowing behind him. No. Dad. I said. For once. Enough is exactly what I'm saying. The words did not echo. They landed. That was better. A room full of people had just watched my father's confidence crack under the weight of his own signature. They had seen the DNR form, the healthcare proxy, the bank transfers, and the forged power of attorney. They had heard me speak in a voice rough from a ventilator but clear enough to cut through every chandelier in that ballroom. And still, Marshall Bennett tried to stand taller. Men like my father do not surrender just because the truth arrives. They look for a technicality, a softer witness, a weaker angle, a person they can pressure behind closed doors. He glanced at the guests, then at Preston, then at the reporter, then at me. You are unwell, he said. There it was again. Not wrong. Unwell. A word with just enough medical flavor to sound concerned and just enough poison to make people question me. I nodded once. Yes, I said. I was in a serious accident. I had chest trauma, a brain injury, and a ventilator tube down my throat. I am still recovering. Thank you for finally noticing. A few people made that uncomfortable sound people make when they want to laugh but do not know if it is allowed. Marshall's face tightened. I stepped closer to the stage. Not all the way. I had no interest in standing beside him like this was a family portrait. The next slide appeared behind him. A clean timeline. The accident. My admission to Northbridge Regional. Marshall and Beverly's arrival. The billing consultation. The DNR signature. The discovery of my valid healthcare proxy. Elias revoking the DNR. My first neurological response. Then the money transfers. Simple. Chronological. Ugly. I turned slightly so the room could see both me and the screen. I'm going to keep this very plain, I said. Because plain truth is usually enough. That was something I wished more families understood. You do not need to dress the truth in fancy language. Most of the time, people get lost because someone complicated the story on purpose. My father signed a DNR while I was unconscious. My mother supported the decision by staying silent. My legal healthcare proxy was ignored until a nurse found the correct document. While I was still in critical care, funds were transferred out of my personal savings account using a power of attorney I did not sign. The forged document filled the screen again. My fake signature was on the left. My real signature was on the right. Even from the back of the room, the difference was obvious. I heard someone whisper, "That's not even close." Marshall snapped. "This is private financial information." I looked at him. "No. It became evidence when you stole it." That one did get a reaction. A low sound moved through the guests. Not loud, but enough. The room was turning. I could feel it. Not toward gossip. Toward recognition. Some of those people had probably seen money fights before. Estate battles. Sibling betrayals. Second marriages. Stepchildren. Sudden illnesses. Family members who become very interested in paperwork once someone else cannot speak. Older people know this story. Maybe not my exact story, but close enough. Beverly seemed to sense the room slipping away. That was when she changed tactics. She came down from the stage carefully. One hand pressed to her chest. Eyes wet. Mouth trembling. She looked like a mother in a magazine ad for forgiveness. Otter, she said softly. Sweetheart, this has gone too far. I did not move. She took another step. We are your family. That sentence used to work on me. It is amazing how many people use the word family when what they really mean is access. Access to your money, your time, your silence, your forgiveness, your house, your labor, your hospital bed. Beverly held out her arms. Come here, she whispered. Let us stop this before more damage is done. There it was, before more damage is done. Not before we hurt you more. Before people see it? I let her get close enough that everyone could see the gesture. The tragic mother reaching for her injured daughter. The perfect photo. The emotional reset. If she could hug me, she could blur the whole thing. People love a hug. A hug makes accountability look rude. Right before her hands touched me, I stepped back. Just one step. Small. Firm. The whole room saw it. Beverly froze. You didn't want a family. Mom, I said. You wanted a payout. I'm just giving you the bill. Her face broke then. Not because she was sorry. Because the line had landed in public. Kinsley made a choked sound from the stage. That's cruel, she said. I turned to her. No. Kinsley, cruel is wearing your sister's necklace at her fake memorial while using her coma to fund your wedding. Preston looked at her again. This time, his expression had changed completely. It was no longer confusion. It was disgust trying to stay polite. Kinsley, he said, tell me you didn't know about the money. She looked at him. Then at my parents. Wrong move. He saw it. So did everyone else. I didn't know everything, she said. That sentence is what guilty people choose when innocence is unavailable. I almost felt sorry for Preston. Almost. He had walked into the ballroom thinking he was attending a sad but elegant family event. Now he was standing in the middle of a fraud timeline while his fiancée tried to explain degrees of knowledge. My father stepped off the stage. Preston, do not let this circus influence you. Preston looked at him. Sir, with respect. The circus appears to have been scheduled by your family. I liked him more in that moment. Kinsley turned red. Preston. He shook his head. No. I need to understand whether my wedding deposits came from money taken from your sister while she was in the hospital. Nobody answered. That was answer enough. The next slide appeared. Credit card charges. Bridal. Boutique. Florist. Hotel deposit. Engagement photographer. Private tasting menu. Dates marked clearly. I did not explain every line. I did not need to. Good evidence does not beg. Marshall raised his voice. This is a family matter. Elias stepped forward. No, he said. It stopped being a family matter when forged documents were used to move money across state lines. The ballroom shifted again. Across state lines. Federal words have a special weight. They walk into a room wearing boots. Marshall looked at Elias. What have you done? Elias adjusted his cuffs. My job. Then 2 men and 1 woman entered from the side of the ballroom. Not in dramatic black tactical gear. Not like television. They wore suits. Calm faces. Badges discreet enough that half the room did not understand at first. But Marshall did. So did I. Federal marshals. Alongside them was a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit and a representative from the U.S. Attorney's Office. According to Elias later. At that moment, all I saw was my father's face losing the last of its color. The woman approached Elias first. They exchanged a few quiet words. Then she turned to my father. Marshall Bennett. My father straightened. We need to speak with you regarding allegations of wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and the use of forged legal documents. Beverly made a sound like air leaving a balloon. Kinsley whispered. Daddy? Marshall did not look at her. That told me plenty. The woman continued. Professional and calm. You are not under arrest at this exact moment. But you are being served with a federal preservation order and notice of investigation. You are instructed not to destroy, alter, transfer, or conceal any financial records, electronic devices, trust documents, or communications related to Audra Bennett. Bennett Family Management, LLC. The Audra Bennett Family Medical Fund. Or the Margaret Elaine Bennett Trust. Every word was a nail. I watched Marshall absorb them. For once, he could not talk over the room. He could not charm a banker. He could not tell Beverly to handle optics. He could not call me difficult and expect the walls to agree. The woman handed him the documents. He did not take them at first. Elias said, "Marshall." My father looked at him. Elias smiled faintly. "You may want to accept those. Refusing paperwork has not been your strongest strategy lately." Marshall snatched the documents. Even then. Pride. Always pride. Beverly turned toward me, crying openly now. "Audrey, please, don't do this. He's your father." There are sentences that reveal everything because the person saying them does not hear themselves. He's your father. Not, you're his daughter. Not, he hurt you. Not, you almost died. Just his role. His title. His protection. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt something softer than anger. Not forgiveness. Clarity. My mother was not confused. She had chosen the side of comfort so many times that comfort had become her character. "I didn't do this," I said. "He did. You helped." She flinched. "Good." Kinsley rushed toward Preston, but he stepped back before she reached him. That one step looked familiar. "Boundaries do not have to be loud, Kinsley," he said quietly. "The wedding is off until I understand what I was brought into." She stared at him like he had slapped her. "You can't do that." "I can. My sister is doing this to ruin me." Preston looked toward the screen, where my hospital timeline still glowed. "No," he said. "Your sister survived you." That sentence nearly broke me, not because it was poetic. I did not need poetry, because it was accurate. I had survived the crash. I had survived the DNR. I had survived the forged signature. I had survived the public mourning. The stolen necklace. The fake fund. The family narrative that required me to be quiet. Dead. Or grateful. And now I was standing. Not strongly. Not elegantly. My ribs hurt. My legs were tired. My throat burned. But I was standing. Carla quietly brought the tray with my necklace to Elias. He documented it with his phone. Then held it out to me. I took it. Grandma Margaret's necklace felt warm from the room. For a moment, I saw her hands closing the velvet box years earlier. I heard her voice. "You have value outside what this family asks from you." I had not understood how much I needed that sentence until I was holding proof that someone had tried to erase me and failed. Marshall was still speaking to the federal officials. His voice lower now. Less certain. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "My daughter has been manipulated by Elias." Elias answered without looking at him. "My niece has medical records. Bank records. Witnesses. A valid proxy. And your draft lawsuit against the hospital for not letting her die. If that is manipulation, Marshall, I have become very efficient." The official's eyes moved to my father. "Draft lawsuit?" Marshall went quiet. That was my favorite part. Not the humiliation. Not the crowd. Not even the legal consequences. The quiet. For the first time, my father's words could not outrun his documents. I turned to the guests. "Anyone who donated to the so-called medical fund will be contacted. If you gave money believing it was for my care, I am sorry. I did not authorize that fund. I did not receive that money. I will cooperate fully to make sure the truth is documented." An older woman near the front stood. She was one of my mother's charity friends. Silver hair. Straight posture. Pearls that probably cost more than my Honda. She looked at Beverly. "You told me Audra was gone in every way that mattered." The room went still again. Beverly whispered. "I was grieving." The woman looked at me. I was alive. Standing 6 yards away. "No," the woman said. "You were fundraising." That was the moment Beverly lost the room. Not when the DNR appeared. Not when I walked in. Not even when the federal officials arrived. She lost it when another woman, her own age, named the behavior plainly. Sometimes people need permission to stop politely accepting lies. The guests began moving then. Not chaos exactly. More like a controlled evacuation of dignity. Some headed for the doors. Some approached Elias's assistant to provide contact information. The reporter was typing fast enough to risk injury. The photographer had stopped taking glamour shots and started documenting evidence like his career had just changed lanes. Kinsley stood alone near the stage. My father stood with federal papers in his hand. My mother sat in a chair, as if her bones had misplaced their instructions, and I stood under the ballroom lights with Grandma's necklace in my palm. Elias came into my side. "You need to sit down," he said quietly. "I'm fine." "You are pale." "I'm always pale. I work nights." "Audra." I looked at him. The room blurred slightly at the edges. Not emotionally. Physically. Denise was going to be unbearable about this. "Fine," I said. He guided me to a chair near the side wall. I sat carefully. One hand protecting my ribs, the other still closed around the necklace. Marshall looked at me from across the room. For a second, I thought he might apologize. That was old Audra thinking. Instead, he said, "You have destroyed this family." I looked at the DNR form still projected behind him. "No," I said. "I stopped letting you use me to hold it together." And for once, nobody corrected me. That was how the ballroom ended for me. Not with shouting. Not with police dragging my father out in front of the dessert table. Though I admit there was a tiny, petty part of me that would not have minded the visual. It ended with me sitting in a chair near the side wall, Grandma Margaret's necklace in my hand, watching the Bennett family story collapse under the weight of its own paperwork. People love dramatic endings. Life usually prefers paperwork, follow-up calls, and people in sensible shoes asking for copies. The federal officials did not arrest Marshall that night, but they took his devices under the preservation order. His phone, his laptop, the backup drives he thought nobody knew about. The accounts connected to Bennett Family Management LLC were frozen before he could move another dollar. That was one of the first lessons Marshall learned after the gala. Panic is not a financial strategy. Beverly left through a side door with Kinsley. Though left is generous. They moved like people trying to escape a restaurant after realizing they had no wallet and everybody had seen them order lobster. Preston did not go with them. He stayed behind long enough to speak to me. I was still sitting because my body had voted against standing. And for once, I respected the election results. Preston approached carefully. His tie loosened, his face pale. "Audra," he said. "I am sorry." That surprised me. Not because I thought he was guilty. He was not the architect. But most people connected to a disaster prefer to step away quietly and hope nobody remembers they were in the photo. He looked toward the emptying ballroom. "I should have asked more questions." I gave him a tired half-smile. "We all should have." He swallowed. "Kinsley told me you wanted the necklace to stay in the family." "It did," I said. "With me?" His mouth tightened. But not in anger at me. "I ended the engagement." I heard. Her mother said I was abandoning her in a crisis. That one almost got a laugh out of me. Beverly considers consequences a crisis. Preston looked like he wanted to respond, then thought better of it. "Smartman. I hope you recover," he said. "I plan to." He nodded once, then walked away. I never saw him again. Except in one article months later about his family foundation redirecting a large donation to a nursing scholarship fund. He never contacted me personally. He did not need to. Sometimes the cleanest apology is corrected behavior at a distance. That night, Elias drove me back to Potomac. I fell asleep before we crossed out of Manhattan. Not elegant. Open mouth. Neck pillow. One shoe half off. Revenge may be satisfying, but recovery still demands a nap. The weeks after the gala were not glamorous. That is important to say. People imagine that once the truth comes out, life becomes a parade. It does not. Truth is not a magic wand. It is more like turning on the lights in a filthy room. You can finally see the mess, but now someone has to clean it. And the Bennett mess was impressive. The investigation confirmed what we already knew, and then found more. Because apparently my father believed fraud was like golf. Once he started, he kept trying to improve his score. The forged power of attorney had been used to move money from my savings. The transfers crossed state lines through accounts connected to his LLC. The medical fund donations had been diverted. Several trust-related documents had been altered, delayed, or misrepresented. Marshall had also used Grandma Margaret's house as collateral in ways the trust did not allow. That house mattered. It was the old brick place with squeaky stairs and terrible coffee memories. The place where Grandma had kept peppermint candies in a blue dish and told me nurses ran the world because doctors needed someone to remind them where the patient was. Marshall and Beverly had been living there as if it belonged to them. It did not. The trust moved faster once the trustee knew I was alive, competent, and represented by a lawyer who looked mildly disappointed even when he was winning. Marshall's access was removed. Beverly's spending privileges vanished. The house was placed under proper trust control, then eventually sold as part of a broader settlement and asset recovery plan. My parents had to leave. I did not watch. I could have. Elias offered to send me photos of the movers, because apparently sarcasm is genetic on the Bennett side. I told him no. That was not mercy. It was hygiene. Some moments do not need to live in your head. Marshall and Beverly moved into a rented studio apartment outside Baltimore. Not poverty. Let us be honest. They were still better off than many people. But for them, it felt like exile, because there was no garden club, no private driveway, no dining room where Beverly could arrange flowers and pretend character came with crystal glasses. Kinsley moved in with a friend for a while. Her social circle thinned quickly. That is the thing about people who orbit money and status. They are very loyal until the lighting changes. Once the engagement ended and the articles came out, Kinsley discovered that sympathy is harder to collect when the public can see the receipt. She sent me messages. Long ones. Short ones. Angry ones. I know. The greatest hits of a person who wants forgiveness without confession. You ruined my life. Mom is sick because of you. Daddy made mistakes. But you went too far. Grandma would be ashamed. That last one almost got a response. Almost. But Grandma Margaret had already spoken through her trust. Her necklace. And the choice she made when she protected me better from the grave than my parents had while standing beside my hospital bed. So I did not answer. Healing taught me that silence can be a boundary, not a weakness. My own recovery continued in pieces. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Follow-up scans. Breathing exercises. Appointments that always seemed to be scheduled at the worst possible hour. I graduated from the guest house hallway to walking the long driveway. Then to short trips outside. Then to returning to St. Bartholomew Medical Center in a limited administrative role. The first time I walked back into the ICU, I had to stop near the nurse's station. The monitors beeped. The air smelled like antiseptic. Someone was asking for a medication override. Someone else was hunting for a missing consent form. Normal chaos. My eyes filled before I could stop them. Pat had transferred back to Northbridge by then. But she sent flowers with a card that said, "Try not to scare any more hospitals. We have enough paperwork." I kept that card. Eventually, Adis. Bartholomew offered me the position of head of nursing for critical care operations. I thought they were joking. My director, Angela, folded her hands and said, "Audra, you reorganized 3-unit protocols while on medical leave because you were bored." I was helpful. You sent a 19-page memo on ventilator communication delays. It had bullet points. You are taking the job. So I took the job, not because it was a perfect happy ending. Promotions do not erase trauma. A title does not fix betrayal. But it meant I could turn what happened to me into better systems for other people. Better documentation. Stronger patient advocacy. More training around healthcare proxies and family pressure. Clearer escalation when staff feel something is wrong. Pat had saved my life by refusing to ignore a bad feeling and a buried document. I wanted every nurse under me to know that instinct matters. But documentation makes instinct powerful. A month after I started, a letter arrived at my office. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Marshall. I let it sit on my desk all morning. Then through lunch. Then until the evening shift began arriving with travel mugs and tired faces. Finally, I opened it. "Audra, I have had time to think. Your mother and I are living in a situation you would not recognize. Everything we built has been taken. I know mistakes were made. But I hope you can find mercy. I am still your father. Families should not end this way." There was more. A lot more. Words like pressure, confusion, influenced, unfair, and legacy appeared several times. Apology did not appear once. That told me everything. Marshall did not want forgiveness. He wanted relief. There is a difference. Forgiveness requires truth. Relief only requires the victim to get tired. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. For a few seconds, old training pulled at me. Not nursing training. Daughter training. The instinct to soothe. To explain. To make the room easier for everybody else. To answer because silence might seem cruel. Then I looked around my office. My office. A framed copy of my nursing license hung on the wall. Grandma's photo sat on the shelf. Her Chanel necklace rested in a small velvet box in the drawer. Not because I was afraid to wear it, but because I wanted to choose when. On my desk was a draft proposal for the Margaret Bennett Nursing Resilience Scholarship. The scholarship would help nursing students who were estranged from their families, aging out of support, escaping financial control, or simply trying to build a life without the safety net everyone assumes exists. Tuition assistance, emergency housing grants, legal document workshops, healthcare proxy education, financial literacy, practical things. Grandma would have liked that. She had never been impressed by speeches when a useful form would do. I did not write back to Marshall. Not that day. Not ever. That may disappoint some people. There is a version of family stories where the wounded daughter forgives. The father cries. The mother admits everything. And Thanksgiving becomes warm again by the final scene. That is a nice story. It is not mine. My ending was quieter. My father faced charges and settlements. My mother lost the social life she had protected more fiercely than her child. Kinsley learned that being the golden child does not mean much once the gold turns out to be stolen. Elias remained impossible, loyal, and allergic to emotional speeches. Pat retired 6 months later and then immediately started volunteering. Because nurses are terrible at stopping. And I lived. That was the real ending. Not revenge. Life. I moved into a small house near the hospital with a front porch. A stubborn rose bush. And locks only I controlled. I changed every emergency contact. Every beneficiary form. Every password. Every key. I made copies of my healthcare proxy and gave them to the right people. I taught seminars at the hospital about advanced directives. Not as a dramatic warning, but as basic adult maintenance. Like checking smoke detectors or knowing where your insurance card is. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I touched the thin scar on my chest. It was not pretty. It pulled slightly when the weather changed. It reminded me of the crash, the ventilator, the DNR form, the ballroom. The moment my father looked at me and realized I was not going to disappear for his convenience, but I no longer saw it as a mark of tragedy. I saw it as a boundary, a line my old life could not cross. For years, I had thought being a good daughter meant staying available, answering every call, fixing every problem, paying every bill, swallowing every insult because family was family, and love was supposed to be patient. Love can be patient, but love is not supposed to be blind, broke, and voiceless. If there is one thing I would tell anyone listening, especially if you have spent a lifetime keeping peace in your family, it is this: peace built on your silence is not peace. It is a hostage situation with better manners. Get your papers in order. Choose the person who will protect your wishes, not the person who feels entitled to them. Do not confuse being needed with being loved, and never assume that setting a boundary means you have stopped caring. Sometimes, setting a boundary is the first honest care you ever give yourself. The DNR form that was supposed to erase me ended up setting me free. My father signed it with a steady hand, but I lived with steadier ones. The strongest lesson in Audra's story is that love should never require you to disappear. Stay silent, or sacrifice your own safety just to keep a family comfortable. Many people, especially older adults, spend years believing that being dependable means saying yes to everything, paying every bill, forgiving every insult, and letting relatives make decisions they have not earned the right to make. But real family does not treat your kindness like an open bank account. Real love respects your voice, your boundaries, your property, and your medical wishes. Audra's survival reminds us to put important things in writing before a crisis happens: healthcare proxy, will, trust, emergency contacts, passwords, and beneficiary forms. Choose the person who will protect your wishes, not simply the person with the closest title. A parent, child, sibling, or spouse is not automatically the safest decision maker. Trust is proven by behavior. The deeper message is simple. Peace built on silence is not peace. It is control. Setting a boundary does not mean you stopped loving people. Sometimes it means you finally started loving yourself with the same loyalty you kept giving everyone else.